and welcome to the 2022 Maui County interviews. And today we have with us Walter Ritte, who's running for State Senator for District 7, and that includes East Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. Walter, welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Aloha, thank you.
Walter, we have a lot of new viewers here and new voters, and not everyone knows your extensive background in our community. So could you please just let us all know a little bit about your civic engagement, when that started, and what has your been engagement within the community, and how do you feel that gets you ready for this important position of state senator?
Yes, I'm a hunter. So during my younger years, after I got married, I got into some political pilikia with the person who was running for mayor for Maui County. And I had a hard time getting a job because I wouldn't get involved in politics. So I had to feed my family by hunting. So that got me involved in trying to figure out how am I going to hunt on these large tracts of land that was owned by foreigners. So I got involved in trying to find out my roots as a Hawaiian and found out that we had access rights from Kamehameha, King Kamehameha. He created Mamalahoa Kanawai, the first law punishable by death, which gave safety to everybody who was using trails for access to feed their families or to go and visit their neighbors. So this law is a law that is still in the books. And we organized ourselves as a community in the 70s to try and figure out how we're going to be able to feed our families by going to the ocean and gathering, and by going to large landowner lands to go hunting. So that got me really involved in trying to figure out how to organize the community so that the community could speak with one voice. So that was my introduction into trying to figure out how to get things done, and realizing that we had to get together as a community to do that. So I began to learn how to organize. That took me a few years. We continued pushing the idea all the way into 1978, when I got invited to come to the Constitutional Convention for the state of Hawaii. And we introduced Article 12, Section 7, which guaranteed access on lands for religious and subsistence activities in the state of Hawaii. So basically, as a matter of survival, I had to learn how to organize our community to get things done, and to also get involved in politics to get things done.
Now, Walter, there was also a lot of other activity that you did with Kaho'olawe and getting involved with that also. Could you just give a little background about that engagement that you've had?
Yes, because we were the first Hawaiians ever to protest as a community, we had a lot of television coverage and notoriety. So Charlie Maxwell from the island of Maui had a plan to go and try and rescue Kaho'olawe from the military. So because of he saw us on television, he gave me a call and asked if I would want to participate. So it wasn't my idea to go to Kaho'olawe, it was Charlie Maxwell's idea. And I was like, I'm not too sure. I don't even know what the island looks like. And he said, well, we're going to need a hunter. And I said, okay, now you got me. So my plan was to go over there, do hunting to feed everybody while we did the protesting. And what happened was the helicopters came, threatened all of the boats. The boats turned around to go back. I was seasick, and I said, no, I need to get on that island. So I got on the island, and I spent 3 days on the island, exploring the island. And I began to see and feel all of the destruction that was happening on the island. And what really got to me was all of our historic sites were being used as targets, and they were being blown up. So as a Hawaiian, I knew that we were not a written culture. So all of those sites represented something that would tell us about our ancestors and our culture, and they were blowing them up. So that got me angry enough to say that I think this bombing should stop. Not only were they destroying the life of an island, but they were destroying the history of the Hawaiian people. So that initially got me really going. And after the third day, without food and water, the helicopter picked us up. And the helicopter flew straight up like this. And I was looking at this rock when we first started rising up. And then the rock turned into the whole island. And I was just fixed on that whole island. And there was this voice inside of me that said that they're killing me, I'm dying. And right there, my whole life changed. And I was determined that we would not kill an entire island in Hawaii. And from then on, my life was completely different. I just went and did everything possible to save that island.
And continuing on, Walter, taking that passion and that inspiration, insight, message that you received, how have you taken that and translated that into recently in terms of your activities? I know that you ran for office before, and how does that translate into your going into this office as senator, and how has this prepared you for that office?
Yes, this is not my first rodeo. I tried to get into the House the last session and didn't quite make it. We came close, but didn't quite make it. So I was of the opinion that maybe I should just keep working outside of the system. I got involved in Mauna Kea and spent 3 months up at Mauna Kea organizing and protesting what they were doing to that mountain. And then my experience in trying to get into the House left kind of a bad taste in my mouth that I wasted so much of my time and energy and getting nowhere. So then the question becomes, then why are you running again? I'm 76 years old, and people are saying, why don't you learn how to retire? But the young people, I began working with young people. We were protecting and rebuilding fish ponds, and we were knocking down calvary trees so we could plant taro. And we're now trying to figure out how we're going to go Mauka to stop all the soil from coming down and going into our fish ponds and going onto the reef. So one thing led to another thing, and I really got heavily involved from the last election to now in trying to protect the land so that we can survive. And then the young people, I started working with them, and then they kept telling me, Uncle, you have to run again. Why don't you? And my wife said, no, he's not going to run again. So just recently, this is why I'm entering really late. I made a pact with these young people that if they all get involved, then I would get involved, knowing full well that I'm getting ready to pass the torch. So this is like my last hurrah to try and figure out how to get the activists not only to learn how to protect things outside of the system, but get into the system to protect those things.
Thank you for that, Walter. And we'll have our next interviewer will be Lucianne Dene. Lucianne?
Aloha, Brother Walter.
How come you're not running?
You know what? Because we got a great person for consul in our district, Shane Sinensi, no need run. And District 13, everybody and their brother is running. And I am in so many lawsuits right now. Water, Wailea 670. I mean, these liars and crooks, somebody's got to be there and go to court all the time. And that somebody is me. Right now, I'm 75. I'm right behind you, but I'm reaching out to the next generation and saying, okay, we're in this together. So same thing. It's just, and people do ask me to run, but they wanted me to run for consul. But, it's like, hey, I have a good consul person. Why would I run for consul?
Yeah, I think you guys have the best council in the state.
I think we do too. I love our consul. And I love just being a resource for our consul, that they can reach out to citizens and citizen groups and say, what you think? Have you researched this? What's behind the scenes on this particular push? So that's wonderful. Well, let's see. My questions for you, Walter. I know you're passionate about equality for water. And although this is sort of a county issue right now, it's also a state issue. But there's a discussion right now to create a water authority that would not be the Board of Water Supply and would not be the Commission on Water Resource Management, but would be a county level water authority that could take on like management of watersheds. In other words, it could seek funding for these things. And the proposal, as Shane Sinensi has written it right now, and his committee has reviewed, has community boards, which we have never had before, like in East Maui. No one in East Maui, ever gets to have any say in East Maui water. There was these watershed partnerships. No one who lives in East Maui is part of that watershed partnership. I don't know how it is in Molokai, but it's like all of us who live the Kuaina. It's like we're just left out. It's the people that own the land at the top of the mountain that have the say over what happens Makai. So this is a very interesting concept. It probably would need state support in terms of, when it's first starting out, maybe some, what do they call it, grant in aid kind of thing to do pilot projects in the watershed. So, what do you think? If you were a senator and folks said, we want to create this, and we would like you to go on record as saying, if you were in the Senate, you'd help support, some early funding for some of the projects that really need to be done on these systems. And we would start with East Maui, but the idea is if there needed to be a way to take over the Molokai system, this is like kind of a format. It's an agency that would have the skill set to manage things. It would have engineers, it would have maintenance people, it would have biologists, it would have hydrologists, it would have the kind of things that our county doesn't really do now, and goes, oh, well, the state's going to do it. And of course, the state never does. So any thoughts on that? Very complex question. I'm sorry, but.
Yeah, but water is a complex issue. And Maui is probably the most complex issue, is coming from the island of Maui.
Yeah.
And we have a very progressive council on Maui. And I don't see any reason why some of the authority over the water should be shared with the home-based people on each of the island. So the state designates a lot of things, and a lot of the information regarding our water is coming from the federal level, telling us the impacts, but not making decisions about what should be done.
Yeah, the Clean Water Act, things like that. They say, hey, you should achieve these standards, but they don't say, and that means you better, do that. Yeah.
So one of the reasons I'm running is because of water. I remember all of the battles that takes years and years and years, and the people with the money was always winning those battles. The Water Commission, the State Water Commission, was always handpicked to represent industry and creating jobs and those kinds of things. So right now there's a shift going on. So I tried to organize a whole bunch of young people on Molokai, get involved outside of the system and to use the state system. And lo and behold, for the first time in my life, I actually saw the state system working. We had a couple of people on the Water Commission that actually understood what we were talking about. And all that was missing was the ability for the community. So we went out there, we did all kinds of things. We went house to house, we did petitions, we did all kinds of things in order to get the people involved. And it was a success story. So we took a river, the largest Molokai, I guess we can call them a stream, because they're not huge rivers. And that's the largest stream of Molokai was being diverted for over 100 years from central Molokai all the way to West Molokai, some 20 plus miles over 13 ahupua'a. So that was, in the face of Hawaiian thinking, where each ahupua'a was supposed to be independent and not be taking things from one ahupua'a to make another ahupua'a sustainable. So we got involved over the years. Took us over 2 years just to get our case heard at the Water Commission. But in the meantime, we're doing all of this work. The long story short was there's a big, huge success story for us on Molokai, where the Water Commission actually went on our side. We petitioned them to do in-stream flow standards to try and keep the things in the river alive. But by the time we had the third hearing, we were demanding that not an in-stream flow system, we were demanding that they take down the dam. And we had enough support from the community, and we actually convinced them that they should take down the dam. So this was like pretty much a historical move on the part of the community on Molokai. So in order not to have Molokai Ranch, which was taking all that water, and Molokai Ranch is a group that is owned by Singapore. They're a foreign-owned company that owns 1/3 of our island.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and they were taking all of our water from the top of our mountain, 7 diversions. So we really went after them, and we're still going after them. But I'm saying that there is success stories because the community is getting involved, and we'd love nothing better than to be able to talk to our progressive county council to help us solve some of our water problems instead of trying to just talk to the people in the state who gets appointed, reappointed, and half the time we don't know who they are. So I would support the idea of giving more power to the county in order to resolve some of our water problems, which are huge.
Thank you. That's a very thorough answer. And I attended 2 of those hearings and they were inspirational. I attended on Zoom to hear the young people from the community and the kupuna and standing shoulder to shoulder, sharing the truth, and the commission listening was very inspirational. I got chicken skin and the video that was produced by the committee. Oh my God, what a story. I'm going to go to the next person. Is that you, Bruce?
Yes, it's Bruce Douglas next.
Yes, I'm sorry I took so much time, but of course, this is an important issue at the state and it's not a, A, B, or C question.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important because Maui is going through some of these really heavy duty water problems, trying to get designated on the west side and trying to get the rivers saved on the east side. So I wanted to make it clear that if I do get into office, that I'm going to be extremely involved in trying to figure out how to resolve some of these issues because I've been involved all of these years outside of the system. So if I get inside of the system, I can bring a lot of the people outside the system to work in the system to get these water issues resolved.
Mahalo.
Hi, Walter.
That's it. Long time no see.
Long time, yeah.
You're a familiar face.
Familiar face. Well, I'm going to go on the same vein as the last bit of questioning. And I'm going to ask you, as you were heavily involved in the GMO moratorium and the Shaka movement and all of that and the Monsanto, what's your takeaway? What did you learn in retrospect that you can use in the future? What did you learn from the past that can carry us forward from that experience? Particularly since Molokai is heavily affected by the GMO crops and employment from them.
Yeah, that took a lot of energy and a lot of time. And I remember at the county level, we thought that it was great that the people that you guys help organize, especially to say, this is our position. And then the county and the mayor, who I can't remember exactly who it was, not paying any attention to the people that elected them. It really got me like I said, well, this system is not working. I mean, what else can you do to try and protect ourselves and our families from all of this horrific farmers that were using our lands to make money and doing it by giving us all kinds of brand new poison concoctions in order to make their money. I almost gave up. It's like, wow, what else can you do and still lose? And I think that was the lowest point in my life about having any hope that you can actually go into the government and get anything done. But we rebounded. People started realizing that they were getting sick, and people were doing lawsuits nationally, and we were getting people that were not only getting hurt here in Hawaii, but internationally. So it was a slow process to defeat this really huge international conglomerates that were looking at Hawaii to make a lot of money on our farmlands because of our environment and our seasons and all of the hot sun that we have here. The only thing I don't like about all of it is that it's still going on. But the proof is, you can keep saying, because now there are all these lawsuits of people getting sick, and then lawyers saying, hey, come to us, we'll help you sue these guys. So it's such a slow process. And I'm hoping that sooner or later, we're going to be able to protect ourselves. What I couldn't understand was the county level, we're making strides on Kauai and on Maui counties. And the state keeps saying, well, the county does not have jurisdiction. So we go to the state, and then the state says, well, the state doesn't have jurisdiction. Then you go to the national level, and the national level is just totally controlled by these huge international companies. So that battle was a really, really hard battle. All we did was learn how to organize. And if it wasn't for what we were doing, things would have been way worse here in Hawaii. So it's not a complete story of success, but it's a story that shows us that if we have fortitude, if you remember how it was and how it is now, it's not the same, but it's not enough. We still got so much more to do. And that's another reason that I'm running, is to try and get a voice in there to say, hey, we are not going to poison the land. We're not going to poison our people in order to create any kind of an economy that's coming from the outside.
Thank you for that. And the other successes is GMO crops are now at 50% of what they were before we attempted the moratorium. So we're making strides there, and a whole lot of people got involved in politics and decided to, instead of fighting, and we got to become the people. So that started a whole nother movement,
Exactly.
which is an incredible success. And with that, Paul, who do I pass it to?
Ed, Kathleen?
Aloha, Walter. Welcome back. I want to ask a question about the State of Hawaii Agribusiness Development Corporation that was set up to facilitate conversion of agricultural lands from pineapple and sugar plantations to more economically viable farms to grow a variety of crops, and that totally failed according to an audit that was done. And I was over all those years, nothing was accomplished apparently in that mission to convert the plantation lands to a more diversified agriculture to feed the people here. What do you think can be done to better utilize our agricultural resources?
Yeah, those guys are like on the bottom of the feeding chain when it comes to agriculture. They're like an independent splinter. I don't know why they formed it or how they got politically all that money to do whatever they're doing. But it really reflected the state's attitude. when we were younger and the pineapple companies went out and the sugar companies went out, and everybody was promising us that we're going to do small agriculture, truck farming, and everybody got all excited to get involved in that, where not these huge companies coming in here and making money off our lands. That was the promise. And a few years later, in walks these huge international corporations and started taking over our farmlands. And then they created this organization that you're talking about. And they did a sloppy job. They gave them a lot of power and there was no oversight over these guys. So they cashed in. They started giving all these lands to these corporations. And that's where the problems really started, especially on Kauai. And the guys that were running it were like hard-headed guys that didn't want to answer to anybody. And they were so new that nobody knew how to control these guys. So they became a huge problem about how they were handling and who they were giving all the lands to in order to make themselves look good. They were giving lands out for farmers, but these farmers were poisoning the land and poisoning our people. So I have no support for these guys. They tried to control these guys last session. They did an audit on these guys, and all they got into was a big political fight over who was right and who was wrong. And they're still there, and they're still doing their havoc. So if I get in, I'm going to make sure that I get involved in there. And I know a lot of the horror stories that comes out of that organization.
And just following up on that, you were talking about poisoning. It's known that the state of Hawaii allows, or what they do is they use glyphosate, Roundup, on. Although the county is not allowed to. There's a ban on that by the county. The state is allowed to do that. And though they say they just use it on invasive species, I think they go beyond that. What do you know about that?
Well, glyphosate, when we started working at the fish pond, I remember this guy who was in charge of the lands there. He was spraying this stuff all over. And he kept telling us, no, this stuff is safe. This stuff is safe. So we couldn't argue with him. He was the expert, so-called expert. We just stayed away from him. And lo and behold, he's got cancer. So we had to wait till people suffered and in the long term, find out what really happens to people using these pesticides that these companies are using. And we're using it according to what the package says. It says to use this thing, you do A, B, C, D. Okay, fine. But when they start mixing them together, that goes right out the window. Nobody really understands what is happening when you start mixing all of these fertilizers. And it's just that hoping that we can now convince the legislators that look at all of the results of us using these lands, find out what are all of these, do a study on all of the problems, health problems that were happening. And I remember when we were on Kauai, this one guy was big guy. He was like going after us, threatening us, bringing all the workers in the blue shirts. And he ended up being the county council, getting on the county council. He was so popular. And now he's in jail because he was doing drugs all over the county. So we got those horror stories, you know. So hopefully if we add up all those horror stories, sooner or later, our government is going to be able to say, yes, we need to protect our people and we need to protect our land and our soil from these huge companies.
Yeah, I've often heard that the downside of alternative methods against using alternatives to using glyphosate is that it's cost prohibitive. It would require more personnel and more equipment and more, but the county is able to accomplish that. So
I don't think there's a lot of different ones that are coming out where you can get rid of your weeds and stuff with other methods. It might cost a little bit more. It might be harder work,
right.
But better than poisoning your kids and poisoning the future generations.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Walter, I'll ask the next question. and it has to do with our education system that we have here. Maui County certainly has seen a high level of turnover of its teachers. There are some questions about some of the schools, the effectiveness in terms of the infrastructure of some of those schools. And yet it seems like a lot of money comes from Maui and goes to the Oahu-centric education system that we have. What would you do to help change this system where we can't have teachers even remain because they're not getting paid enough while a lot of money goes over to Oahu and seems to disappear?
Yeah, the educational system, I saw the coverage on television last month where parents were yelling at all of the people in charge of our educational system. I'm not quite sure exactly why they were yelling, but they were like the worst community meetings ever in the educational system. So the system got a major change of attitude because of the COVID situation. Kids were staying home. Parents were beginning to realize that if two parents are working, we can't just farm out our kids and expect them to become out okay. We started taking more of an attitude of, there's a whole bunch of people now in Molokai doing homeschooling. Some of the kids are learning how to go on this machine over here to go to school. It's naturally being changed. Now, how much change is going to be allowed? There's also huge battles about what kind of history do you teach the kids? What kind of subject do you teach the kids? Because of all of this anger and hatred that's going on nationally, especially in our government, where we're having like a civil war going on between the Republicans and the Democrats. And it's a stalemate kind of thing where every single vote matters. And you have one crazy president that's out of control that everybody's so afraid of that. And he's feeding off of all of this anger and hatred again. And it started to blossom and bloom out. So, it's really difficult times. And I think people are beginning to realize that families need to get involved in the education of their kids also, whether it's homeschooling or whether it's getting involved in the PTA. I remember growing up, my parents, the PTA was like important. Now nobody even goes to any PTA meetings. They send cops over park in the parking lot to make sure the schools are run well. It's a huge problem. You turn on the television and people are shooting kids in schools. I mean, it's like, boy, talk about a huge problem. Education is one, and I'm willing to get involved, but it's like, I don't exactly know how to solve the problem, except that I'm seeing what's happening here on Molokai, and on Molokai, families are taking more responsibility over their kids.
So, Walter, what are your thoughts in terms of having vouchers? Instead of having the monies goes to the local school system, that it could either that parents have a choice that they could utilize that money for a charter school or for homeschooling, and utilize those education funds through that channel. Is that something that you would support or look at?
I'm assuming that if they had vouchers, they would be more apt to use those vouchers for local kinds of things, whether it's food or whatever those vouchers are being used for. And I think that'll allow more local people getting involved in feeding their kids or starting businesses to support the school system instead of importing all these gallon cans that come over on the barge to feed our kids. And that those are not fresh kinds of food that we really want to be feeding our kids. So anything that's going to allow us being more independent here in Hawaii and not depending on imports, I'm going to be supporting.
Great. Thank you. Next, we'll go to Lucianne.
Sorry, I muted because there was noise here. Walter, I'm wondering, Hawaiian Homes just got a large chunk of funding, and there certainly are a lot of Hawaiian homelands on Maui, on Molokai. I don't know, does Lanai have any Hawaiian homelands?
Yes.
Also, they have. So I think some people are worried that it's like a big dump of cash, and who knows how accountable the agency will be. So as a senator and as a Hawaiian and as a person who I'm sure has friends that are waiting on the list for Hawaiian homesteads, would you have any ability to, help give some oversight to the fact that this money makes progress every year in its intended purpose? And what would you suggest you would do? And who, this is another follow-up, and who else in the legislature do you think you would need to help you?
Well, I'm a homesteader. So this house that I'm sitting in right here, I built with my own hands, and it cost me $60,000. My wife is happy with it. The department got really angry because I didn't get county permits to do it. But I insisted that the county had no jurisdiction over Hawaiian homeland, that the department could build whatever they wanted to build because they're a federal agency created by a federal agency handed down to the state to administer.
Mm-hmm.
So the state does administrative rules to make their life easy and to make our lives miserable. But they're not laws. So they told me, they said the law is you cannot do this, you cannot do that. And I looked them up and they were just administrative rules. So I built this house. I didn't borrow any money because it didn't cost me that much. I went down, put mangrove posts and tin roof and 2x4s. And my family is happy here. So the department is a problem because of all the departments in the state, they're like on the bottom. So if you don't get appointed to this department and you don't get appointment to this department, but you're still on the list of good guys that voted for the governor, the last hope is that you get appointed to the HHL. So they're like the bottom ring of political power in the state of Hawaii. So everybody's nervous about the $600 million. On Molokai itself, we have 27,000 acres of Hawaiian homelands.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the power, because we're created by the federal government, to put people on that land the best way we know how, instead of depending on state and county rules. And
so if you were a senator,
wait. The people there that the governor is appointed is the key to whether or not this thing is going to be successful. Can they spend that $600 million, or is it going to be wasted like they've wasted other huge monies that came down? So that's the problem. And if I get involved in there, that's going to be one of my pet projects because I'm a homesteader and I know what the capabilities are of this department, and they should just stand up and make sure that they create their own rules and regulations so that they can be successful.
and is there a way that, legislators like yourself, I assume you would also reach out to, other legislators on other islands, can have some sort of an oversight role, that there's a check-in every year or something, on, if homes are really getting built and families are really getting on the land?
Yeah, well, the Constitution says you shall give the department A, B, C, D. So the legislature gives them A, but B, C, D, they don't give them. So they get taken to the courts, and the court says, no, this is not a problem for the courts. This is a political problem. So even though the Constitution says these amount of monies need to go to Hawaiian homes every year, they're not getting it. because the legislators do not trust the department because of their track record. So that's the key, is to go in there and take those constitutional laws and make the legislature abide by those constitutional laws that says this is what you're going to do, this is how much you're going to give the department, and make sure that they do the right thing.
But they did give the department a lot in one big chunk.
First time in the history of the state that they
Right.
did.
But don't you think that if DHHL is going to expect, this to happen more regularly, they're going to have to show that they were good stewards and really did something with the money. And that's why I'm just wondering, the oversight. Do you think the legislature has any oversight over these appropriations that they make?
Yes, they do. Right now, this 600 this is the test, right? You get this huge amount of money, and if you can't spend it in the time that's allotted to you, and you can't create whatever you're supposed to create, then it's going to be really difficult for the department to become any kind of a viable Hawaiian entity. So this is the proof of the pudding. These monies are going to have to be spent in time, and there's so many things that they can do with it. I'm hoping they're going to hire enough staff to get these things done in the first place. So I don't know all of the rules that are connected with this $600 million, but they're going to have to hire more staff to get the ability to spend these monies in the right way.
So if you were elected, would you ask your staff to kind of research those rules and let you know where the, where the leverage points were?
I'm a homesteader. So if I want to survive, I better get my act together.
All right. Mahalo. Bruce?
Bruce will be the last question. Bruce?
Yes, Walter. In Maui, one of the big issues here is affordable housing and affordable rentals. As we all know, the price of houses and housing, the price of rentals has gone sky high, and the people who live here can't afford to live here. If you were in the Senate, what would be your solutions to these issues?
That's a good one. These guys are protected. Anybody can come here, rich, poor, or otherwise, and build whatever they want to build. There's very little rules and regulations about how that is spent. So the problem we have is this place is so beautiful. It's like having a beautiful woman or something, because people all want to come here and live, not knowing that in the process, they might be destroying this very beauty that we all enjoy. So one of the things that we do here on Molokai, I don't live on Maui, so I don't know what's happening over there. I'm sure it's a lot worse, judging from how much money they spent on a new airport. When the tourists come here, most of them don't go home. So the prices of houses is just skyrocketing. This place is so beautiful that they all want to live here. So I don't know how to solve that problem. All I know is that we need to solve that problem. Managing these tourists is going to be a big way of trying to manage the housing problems. People having two houses, people leasing out their houses for rooms. I mean, there's all kinds of shenanigans going on. There's a long list of things that are going wrong. And I think the county is trying to manage some of those things. And I'm really watching how the county operates, because if I get in to be a senator, I'm going to make sure that I'm working closely with the county guys, because they understand the problems a lot better than the state guys do. So I know we got a really good progressive county council. So they're working on it, and I'm following them closely to figure out how we're going to do that. I think one of the big problems is trying to figure out that because of our beauty, the beauty doesn't actually kill us.
Thank you, Walter.
Walter, we covered a lot of ground during our interview, so I'm wondering if there's I wonder if there's anything that you would like to say that you haven't had a chance to talk about at this time, or any concluding statements that you'd like to make to our viewers.
Yeah, it's like, yes, I'm a very active person, and people get the wrong idea about why I'm doing a lot of things. But I want to say that I've learned how to get things done, how to figure out how we're going to last longevity, and not just kill ourselves in the process of being lazy and wasteful in all the things that we do. So some people are going to be afraid because of my activism, but I'm saying that my ability to organize and be active in the community is going to double my chances of getting things done in the Senate. So if people are afraid of me, then they won't vote for me to get into the Senate. So all I need to say is that my love and my kuleana, my responsibility is not only to us here today, but it's also to the future generations. Because as a Hawaiian, we have to think longevity, and we have to make sure that our future generations have the same chances that we have. So we need to protect the beauty and the resources that we have today for the future generations, and not just for us to use today. So if you're a greedy guy, you're not going to want to vote for me. But if you're here because you love this place and you want to keep this place beautiful, and you want to make sure that climate change is not going to kill all of us because we're little dots in the middle of the Pacific, then I'm the guy that you got to vote for.
Thank you, Walter. Walter Ritte, running for state senator for District 7, that's East Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, you can also get all the interviews that we've done at MauiPonoNetwork.org and also on channel 54 at Akaku that we show. Mahalo very much.
Good to see all you guys still active. Mahalo nui. Aloha.